It started really with PAVO, which is the Professional Association of Volleyball Officials, to be a staff member. Little baby steps like that, getting your national rating and certification and so forth. And then all of a sudden morphed into bigger and better opportunities and things that you never even guessed that you could do, like NASO board. Who knew? And Dana, you serve on the board. I served on the board, and it was a great opportunity to rub shoulders with other sport leaders. And then we just came off the ODA, which is the Officials Development Alliance. Marcia was on that. And now you're talking about NFL, NBA, Major League Baseball, USTA, National Hockey League, those kinds of people that are responsible for training officials. And it's a great think tank to be able to be exposed to people like that. And yet their problems really are similar problems to us, even though they're at a very high level. So last thought, coming off the court is really a hard decision to make, but our lives just took us elsewhere, and we're just really good friends and are able to lean on each other and know that each of us are there for one another. And some of our friends just call us the Troika. And so I had to look that up. I wasn't too sure what it is, but your listeners can look it up. It's quite the threesome.
The session really is extremely unique. And when we first started it, I would be hard-pressed to tell you who the crew was the first time we did this, because it didn't start with the first convention. It took a few years, although, yes, I totally give Joan the credit for coming up with the idea, comparing it to what the coaches do. But I was the moderator for a lot of years. And because at that time I was Secretary of Rules Editor, and I was also Executive Director of PAVO, so it kind of made sense. And yet I was trying to stay very sensitive to the idea that these are people who not only maybe just called the biggest match of their life last night, but at least half of them have another match to do tomorrow or the next day. And we sure don't want to get in their heads, right? I mean, we don't want to screw with them right now and have them go out with any doubts or concerns or whatever. So you walk a very fine line there.
Yeah, I mean, it's uplifting to be part of this community. It's different than any other communities I've ever been a part of. We all know what everyone goes through. We've all been there. We've all had the crazy coach. We've all made that bad call. We've all been there. We are like, to me, it's like a sisterhood and brotherhood together. Once we put that uniform on, you can be whatever you want outside, but once we have the uniform on, we are bound to help our partner.
And now, episode 23, letter U, Uniqueness. Join host Dana Pappas with special guests Joan Powell, Anne Pufahl, and Marcia Alterman on the From A to Zebra podcast.
Welcome back to the From A to Zebra podcast. I'm Dana Pappas. My co-host Nate Acosta is out on the road doing what we all love, officiating. So we're excited. We had to wait until late in the alphabet for the volleyball season to end so that we can bring you this episode with 3 incredible guests. On this episode, we're covering the letter U, and our topic of the day is uniqueness. Our guests will talk about all of the things that make officiating special, and we can't think of anyone better to deliver than this message than our 3 special guests. On this episode, we bring you quite the trio of volleyball leaders, Marcia Alterman, Joan Powell, and Anne Pufahl. Welcome to the show, ladies.
Thank you. Good to be here,
Dana.
Absolutely. Looking forward to this. Before we get started, every year I'm going to just throw this in. Lindsay Atkinson, who's a director of sport at the NFHS, and I have the opportunity to be with these 3 ladies at the Professional Association of Volleyball Officials Convention. As it goes around the country, we get to hang out with what we call officiating royalty. So it's always an honor for us to be able to hang out with these 3 who bring so much passion and energy and good humor to officiating, and we definitely appreciate that. So before we get really into the topic of the day, could you each tell us a little bit about your officiating journeys, how you got started all the way up to where you are today? And I'll let you all choose who starts this conversation off.
I'll go
Are
first.
we going to go with the oldest?
Well, let's do that. Let's see. Who would that be?
I wonder.
Not it.
Yeah, there's. All right, that would be me.
Nose.
would be happy to, because what I'm about to tell you, these two probably didn't necessarily experience, but I loved volleyball when I was in high school, and I didn't make cheerleading 4 years in a row. And so I went with sports. And then it morphed into collegiate play and a course in officiating as part of my physical education major. And so I loved it, and I got really turned on. I got to be able to start at the CYO level. And now some of you that are listening are going to laugh out loud, because it was outdoors in Tucson, Arizona, with 9 on a side on asphalt with a turned over garbage can as my ref stand. And it was $5 a match, and I thought I had died and gone to heaven, because, I was a college kid, and that was great money back then. So then it just morphed into moving to Colorado Springs, and got to do high school, of course, and more middle school, and then junior college to Division 3 to 2 to 1, and the rest is history. But it's interesting, because the circle of life then, of course, comes back around, and I still referee today at the high school ranks, because I'm busy at the collegiate level, not officiating. Had to step down because I now am a coordinator of officials and assigned at the D1 level. And these two women it was quite the upbringing and officiating. Learned a lot from these two, and I'm going to dish it off to the next oldest, which is Marcia.
Okay, thanks. So my starting point is similar. I, too, was a physical education major and had to take an officiating class, and then quickly figured out that that was a lot more fun and a way to make money than flipping burgers or wait tables like many of my friends were doing. So in college, I did anything I could to make money. I did basketball, I did softball, I did volleyball. I did not have a volleyball background before that time, but I did get my arm twisted to join Wichita State's volleyball team, knowing nothing. And quickly, I found my niche there, both in the sport of volleyball and in officiating, because the truth was, at 5 foot a little chunky, I was always going to be a better official than I was a player. So I found that worked for me. And similar to Joan, I had the chance in the state of Kansas. The pickings are a little slim when it comes to volleyball officiating, or at least they were back in the 70s and 80s. So I did get to work some junior college, NAIA, a lot of NAIA. That's where I kind of cut my teeth. And then did get to jump right into Division 1, because at that time, Kansas and the surrounding states just didn't have any Division 2 or 3. So ended up getting to jump into Division 1. I'll age myself by saying the first ones were the Missouri Valley and the Big 8. Hello, yeah. And from there, was just lucky enough to sometimes be in the right place at the right time and get some opportunities. So ended up being where I am in 1996. PAVO, I'd already been very involved with them on an administrative level. They decided to hire their first executive director, and I very tentatively raised my hand to do that, with the condition that Joan Powell would be my first president, and talked her into that, and figured out, even though I had an MBA at that time and was managing a medical clinic, I didn't want to get up every morning and have to go to work. And officiating offered me the chance to not do that. So I patched together my first opportunities as a coordinator, along with the PAVO executive director, part-time, doesn't pay anything job, and since then have been able to make my whole living out of volleyball, even though sometimes that was a pretty slim living.
My name's Anne Pufahl. These two women that just spoke are my mentors and my idols and my favorite people to hang out with. I too played in college on the varsity. We actually were very good and went to I think first it was the AIAW, because NCAA didn't do women's sports my first 2 years. And then my junior and senior year, we went to the NCAA tournament. I just loved it. I loved officiating. So during grad school, I worked around the area. I was in Chicago, a lot of D3 schools, but the building I worked out of, that's where the varsity team played their matches. So one day, all of a sudden, someone comes running in and says, "You're a volleyball official, right?" And I go, "Yes." "Well, there's a Division 1 match going on the ref didn't show. Can you do it?" And not knowing any better, I said, "Oh, absolutely." So I walked out, first Division 1 match, gentleman up on top, working the match. There's a terrible 4 hits he missed. And I was showing it. I was doing what I'm supposed to do. I'm going 4 hits. Coach is going nuts. He calls me over and I said, "Yeah, there clearly was a 4 hit." So he reversed it. He did the right thing. At the end of the match, he comes up to me says, "You did a great job. I kind of want you to work for me." And he handed me his business card. And when I read it, it said, "Pete Dunn, coordinator of volleyball officials for the Big Ten." I'm in. That's how I got my break to work. I started working some Big Ten because of Pete Dunn. From there, so I was a Division I official from that point on. Got to call the national championship in Hawaii with none other than Joan Powell as my R1. I was the national coordinator for 1 year for the NCAA. Also, I was the secretary rules editor, and I wrote 6 rule books, which was fun. And I'm currently also an NCAA Division I coordinator.
There's so much like resume on this call. It's just absolutely awesome. And I love how interconnected all of you are. I think that that's so cool. And I don't think there's anybody who could say they got hired the way that you did. If anybody's looking for a pathway into collegiate officiating, that's probably not how it's going to happen. Don't want to burst anybody's bubble, but that's definitely unique. So listening to all of you talk about kind of how you got to where you are and some of the roles that you've had, each of you have really had and continue to hold numerous leadership roles within the officiating community. For each of you, what was the hardest part of transitioning from actively officiating to becoming a full-time supervisor, coordinator, rules editor, all of those things within the officiating community?
I'll go first on this one. I was lucky because even when I got hired in my first jobs as a coordinator, there wasn't so many rules, policies at that time. And so I was able to keep officiating as long as I didn't officiate in those conferences. So I got to stay on the court for quite a while, even after I became a coordinator, which now sounds weird to me, but it worked at the time. But when I finally did have to come off the court, without a question, even to this day, I sit and watch a match and I miss that adrenaline rush that you get from being on the court, from meeting those challenges that come up absolutely instantaneously. I mean, all of our jobs now, let's be real, we frequently have time to think and plan and blueprint and so on. And as an official, you don't get that. And there is a certain adrenaline rush for people like us from that experience that I just don't think can be replaced. So I would say that, plus I still have volleyball friends. Obviously, these two are almost literally my sisters, but it's a little different, the friendships you form once you're off the court, because there's something to be said for being in the trenches with people and developing friendships through that.
Annie?
Yeah, I'll go. I mean, I echo exactly what Marcia said. It's the same thing when you first hear it, you want to be the secretary rules editor, and thinking about, well, I'm going to have to come off the court for that. That was tough. But like Marcia said early on, you could do both. I was a coordinator and I was still refereeing, which was nice. But I'll talk about the SRE job later. But coming off the court is a really hard decision. But in the end, it worked out. And I got to say, supervisor of officials is such a great job, as I get to help develop and watch the officials grow that I bring onto my rosters that I know are going to be good one day, just giving them that break. And then the next thing you know, in 3 years, I see them working their first NCAA tournament round. It's just so fun to watch the people on your staff get better and get good.
And I will too echo what each of my colleagues have said. Coming off the court was really difficult. Years ago, I did a little pinky swear with these two and said, I don't ever want to be the official where a supervisor, coordinator has to say, well, Joan, how about retirement? And I want to be able to recognize that. And I told them that they have to be able to tell me. Well, that did not really come to fruition because the national coordinator job kind of stepped in front. It was the hurdle. And I decided right then and there that I would put my name in the hat. And I was chosen. And that was 5 years with the NCAA of that was probably really tough for me because my personality is such that I was on an island. And Anne, you could probably know that. And Marcia, even in your position too, with the Big Ten being, the highest of the three of us out here. And so to all of a sudden be colleagues with officials and get to go out to dinner after matches and banter with each other and become better. And then all of a sudden now you're national coordinator and you have to select for postseason. It doesn't bode well for a personality that likes to kind of connect and have good relationships. And so again, I was on an island. But these leadership roles came in little steps. And it was people like Marcia and Anne who suggested me to go to the next level. And it started really with PAVO, which is the Professional Association of Volleyball Officials, to be a staff member. little baby steps like that, getting your national rating and certification and so forth, and then all of a sudden morphed into bigger and better opportunities and things that you never even guessed that you could do, like NASO board. Who knew? And Dana, you serve on the board. I served on the board, and it was a great opportunity to rub shoulders with other sport leaders. And then we just came off the ODA, which is the Officials Development Alliance. Marcia was on that. And now you're talking about NFL, NBA, Major League Baseball, USTA, National Hockey League, those kinds of people that are responsible for training officials. And it's a great think tank to be able to be exposed to people like that. And yet their problems really are similar problems to us, even though they're at a very high level. So last thought, coming off the court is really a hard decision to make, but our lives just took us elsewhere, and we're just really good friends and are able to lean on each other and know that each of us are there for one another. And some of our friends just call us the Troika. And so I had to look that up. I wasn't too sure what it is, but your listeners can look it up. It's quite the threesome. But anyway, we're friends for life. All right, Dana.
That was a great little ending to that. And I love what you were all talking about with kind of the relationships. And Anne, you had said something about how in your position now, it's always great to see one of the officials that you've kind of seen from the beginning advance on. And I talk sometimes about that officiating immortality. When you're training people and they go on and succeed, they're carrying on all the stuff you've taught them. And I think that's just special when you see somebody who did something that you taught them, or maybe they do it the way that you do it. It's just, that's such a cool thing because you kind of live on forever that way, even though you're not on the court anymore. So, and I know you all have a ton of people you've mentored and that are out there still officiating. So, being a fan, when I sit with you all at the national championship and semifinal, just seeing you cheer for the officials, like it's the coolest thing because no one else cheers for the officials, but it's sure nice to sit among a group of people who do. So I enjoy that part as well. So,
and Dana, just to interject there, because Anne has experience coaching and won how many national championships at the club level at Marquette. And so it's almost the same thing because the three of us are really coaches, and it's watching that next generation teach the next generation. Right. And so it might be things that you said, maybe it could be in a formal camp setting, or it could be just one-on-one in an email trying to better their trade. And now all of a sudden they're passing that same stuff on to the next gen, which is why we're all here. So
kind of the point. No, I mean, that's awesome when you hear them teaching the way that you did and you're like, oh, hey, that's a little bit of me. Like that's really cool. So as you all know, officials do love to hear stories. So before we delve into our topic of the day, can each of you share with us your favorite on-court officiating memory? Who wants to take that one first?
I'll go first.
All right.
It was an Iowa match with the coach from a long time ago. I was down. My partner was up. He was a very great official. For some reason, she just didn't like him. So halfway through the match, she always had a clipboard and her pen, and she would always just tap her clipboard when things got rough. So now she's tapping it because she thought they should have called a lift. So she comes up to me and she goes, Anne, you've got to help him. And I said to her, I agreed with that call. And she looked at me, put her clipboard down and said, are you kidding me? You agree? And as she said that, she threw her pen up in the air and did this to me. You've got to be kidding. And the pen landed perfectly in her hand. I looked at her and started laughing. And she looked at me and started laughing and walked away. And to this date, I will never forget that happening.
That is a good one.
Go ahead, Marcia.
Well, my first thought was to tell a couple of stories on Joan Powell, and that's probably why
I knew it.
And I decided not to. I did, because I was afraid some of the humor wouldn't come off so well on video. So if anybody wants to take me out for an adult beverage sometime, I'll be happy to tell a couple of Joan Powell stories. But I decided to sway away from those, and instead I'll say And we just talked about the difficulty of coming off the court. I got to come off of the court in terms of postseason on a real high, because in 1996, just as I was working on the whole thing about PAVO executive director plus maybe a coordinator job, and I could patch together an income, I got my last regional assignment for Division I NCAA, and I got to work in Hawaii, which that alone is worth a good memory or two. But it was the first time I'd ever been there for Division I. I had been there for NAIA before, but I'd never been there for Division I. Had no idea what to expect, but they put 10,000 people in their arena, which in 1996 was never heard of. And it was before rally scoring. So I got to officiate the regional final between Hawaii and Michigan State, which lasted nearly 3 hours. Had a great crew, had 10,000 Hawaiians really mad at me because Michigan State ended up beating them. But it was one of those few times that you really totally just get in the zone and you're just doing your job and putting one whistle in front of the other, as you would say, because it was just such an experience. It was very surreal. And that's one of the memories I hold dear. I saw it on, somebody sent me a link to a YouTube video of that match a couple of months ago. I was blown away by the fact that that's out there somewhere.
That's a good one. I like both of these. So, Joan,
Well,
what do you have for us?
Okay. Usually people kind of talk about the highs. I'm going to talk about one that I think your audience can relate to, because I thought I was in the zone, and it was the semifinals of a national championship with Penn State and Hawaii. And I had to replay a particular call, line judge. Anyway, I had to replay it. I'm not looking too good right now. And then I had to replay another one because the ball really didn't hit the floor. It hit her foot, and I had to come up with a replay. Anyway, I had to talk to each of the captains, and I just told them, first of all, in volleyball, we kind of look where the microphone is, and usually it's kind of the size of a pen, and it sticks out from the standard. And if you want to say something to a captain or a player, you can kind of cover it so it's just between you and the captain or you and the player, so it doesn't go live on broadcast. I couldn't find it. I couldn't find the microphone. But I talked to each of the captains, and here's what I said. I suck right now. And I just said, but I'll tell you what, those captains, they treated me like, they just said, no, you're fine. It's fine. It was almost like kind of a female thing, like she's having a bad day. And so we just need to play beyond her. And they just walked away and they played, and I came out kind of unscathed until I saw one of our fellow officials, and he said, he was there at the convention and at the Final Four, and he said, my gosh, Joan, I just got a text message from my son at home, and he said, Joan Powell just said she sucked on national TV. And I just went, yeah, I did. But it was the truth, and I just felt awful. I mean, talk about being on an island. I felt awful about my performance. Of course, I didn't move on to the championship, whatever. But then I became the national coordinator. So there.
I think that the part I love about that is you mentioned it as you were going into that story about how it's relatable. Like, every official has felt like they sucked at some point.
Amen.
And the fact that you verbalized it for the whole world to hear is, I mean, that's the human part. We talk about officials are not robots, they're human, and you had a really human moment. And the fact that the girls were so supportive, like, oh, you're good, we got you, like that. That's a cool story. That's funny, though. I had not heard that. I had not heard that Joan Powell story. I like that one.
Well, I keep it under the radar, and
it's out now.
Until now, how many hits are you going to get on this podcast? Hey, it's okay if you want more humor. Marcia can tell you the story, probably not the uniform one, but if you want to tell the story about where you had to take over and work with me because my partner was. Do you remember that at Northwestern? Go ahead, because Marcia, it really is a good story.
Classic.
Yes.
So I was coordinator for the Big Ten at this point, and Joan was still working actively in the Big Ten. So she's theoretically working for me. And she had a match assignment at Northwestern when we get there. And as we're kind of getting prepped for the match, her partner calls me and says, I'm stuck. I can't get there. I'm dead in the water. So I'm not going to be there for the match. So I was still actively officiating at the time in other conferences. And so I said, no problem. I'm just going to step in and be Joan's R2 we'll get through this okay. So we did, and we started the match, and we're getting through everything just fine. First, I need to say Northwestern plays in a large arena, and they draw about 250 people, okay? At least at that time. Now it's better. But so let's just say there's plenty of space, okay? So we get through the first two matches, and I mean, we're cooking. We are zoning it. We are. And so as we walk off during the break, which at that point was 10 minutes, we decide to just go to a rather isolated part of the arena. Our two line judges join us, and we're having a love fest. Hey, you're doing a great job. And Joan's saying, hey, thanks for the support. Everything's good. You know, aren't we kicking it? And just, we're great. And as we're patting each other on the back, one of our line judges goes, hey, am I supposed to tell you if one team only has 5 players on the court? And we both looked at each other and said, did that happen tonight? And he said, yeah, you remember when that gal ran over to the bench to try to save a ball? Well, she didn't come back to the court right away, and you guys went ahead and started play. And I said, in the truly supportive fashion, I said, was it the serving team? And he said, yeah. And I went, well, wasn't my job then.
Yeah. Just let's throw Joan under the bus. Basically, serving team, and I beckoned for serve with 5 players on the court.
So she not only threw you under the bus, she backed up right over you.
I did.
Yes, she did.
Yeah.
That's okay.
That's a good one.
All right, Dana, back to you.
Okay. Let's get back to business here. So we're going to jump into the topic of the day, which of course is uniqueness. So throughout this podcast, we've really talked a great deal about why officiating is special, but we've never had an entire episode dedicated to it. So in your opinion, what makes officiating such a unique part of sports? Really, what makes us special as officials?
I'm going to start because I think it's interesting comparing sports to the bigger picture of today's culture, that I think part of what makes us unique is our neutrality. People are so polarized about everything these days. I have friends who simply can't believe when I tell them what I do. I'm the coordinator of these conferences, and they'll go, really, who's your favorite Big Ten team? Well, I don't have a favorite Big Ten team. I don't have a favorite Big Ten coach. I don't have a favorite anything. I have a job to do, and it's to stay neutral and do my best to ensure safety and fairness. And I think our public find that hard to believe. And that's why you see all the stuff going on social media right now about officials that they can't believe for a minute are neutral, and therefore they're cheating. And I just think the part of what makes us unique is that we really do have a strong sense of neutrality. Annie?
I was kind of taking this more on the lines of just watching how hard it is, how hard the officials work to create a perfect atmosphere, and how many of them are just so successful at it. This is where the teams just play, the coaches just coach, and at the end of the match, we as referees walk out knowing that no one remembered us. And it's just kind of like you have to have that attitude where you're not going to be cheered or praised, but if you walk out there and you can say they don't know who I am, that's great. So I like watching officiating teams and how they handle each special situation. It's so amazing, when you just see these people and you know their real personality, and then you see them on the court, it's like, who is that person that's not ranting or raving or jumping around or twitching or whatever? So that's kind of what I was looking for in this.
I sort of equated it to, let's just say, the business world. So you work in a cubicle, let's just say, Dana, and I refuse to believe that your boss or your colleagues hover over your cubicle or come into your office and are forever managing you or giving their opinion. So for all the professions out there, there's scrutiny for sure, but not like what officials take. And, we're kind of, we don't want to be police officers, and yet we are, because we're adjudicating the law. We're adjudicating rules. And I think the uniqueness is how we keep coming back every night. And even if we're getting yelled at, wants this job, who likes to, you don't wake up and go, I can't wait to be booed tonight. And well, seriously. So that's what I think is so unique about the personalities of those that work for us or those that worked with us as partners is that this fraternity/sorority is very unique. And as we teach younger officials, it is so important to remember not to necessarily officiate in the black and white, but officiate in the gray sometimes too. Because I remember a soccer clinician, and I'll just use this little book right here. She said, I don't know about your rule book, but my rule book bends. And I thought, oh, wow, that was really good. I kind of got that. And it's hard to teach because the younger we are as officials, the more we delve into the black and white. Just tell me what overlap is. Just tell me what ball handling is like. Just teach me what it is and I can call it. And yet the gray is what saves us and makes us really good officials.
Loved all three of those answers. And I love talking about unique, how each of you took a different approach to it, because there's so many layers to the uniqueness of officiating. And I think you all hit on three really important topics and perspectives. So we're going to take it a step further. What do you think is special about the volleyball officiating community in particular?
I will tell you only because it was brought to my attention. My husband, he not only coached basketball, but he also officiated. And he would tell me that both in the AVCA, American Volleyball Coaches Association, in that realm and also in the officiating realm, that the giving of each of those groups was amazing to him. And he didn't say that the basketball world was selfish, except that when he would go to clinics, he'd write this stuff down, as did all the coaches, and they kind of kept it close to the vest. And whereas volleyball just seems to, even though, Dana, I want to help you as an up-and-comer, I don't view it as someone that's going to necessarily fill my shoes, and yet isn't that why we're all here? And so if it means you get matches as I get matches and you start to get better, then that's just the attrition rate and that's just what happens. But I didn't realize how, again, unique volleyball was until it was brought to my attention that it seemed to be pretty cold shoulder almost. And please, those that are listening out there from the basketball world, I'm not singling you out. It's just the volleyball community is, we're tight. We just really are. It doesn't matter what level.
Well, and I think that some of the reason for that is, especially back in the day when the three of us were kind of getting started and we were conceptualizing PAVO and so on, I think there was this feeling that we all had to work together in order to promote our sport. Basketball didn't need promoting. Football didn't need promoting. I mean, I realize they have markets they want to gather and that kind of thing, but not like us, not like volleyball. We wanted to establish ourselves as a primary sport, and that took collaboration and coordination both on the officiating side and the coaches side. And that's why you see coaches sharing ideas and officials sharing and mentoring. I just think that was part of it, was we were really invested in the growth of the sport.
Yeah, I mean, it's uplifting to be part of this community. It's different than any other communities I've ever been a part of. We all know what everyone goes through. We've all been there. We've all had the crazy coach. We've all made that bad call. We've all been there. We are like, to me, it's like a sisterhood and brotherhood together. Once we put that uniform on, you can be whatever you want outside, but once we have the uniform on, we are bound to help our partner and get the match done right.
True. I love it. And this is kind of talking about the coaching, officiating that kind of led right into this question. So something that I think is unique and that I think is really a great model is how every year PAVO has an annual convention, and it's done in tandem with the American Volleyball Coaches Association's annual clinic. What do you feel is the largest benefits to having those events taking place basically together? Because I don't know of another sport that's doing that.
Can I give a little background first?
Absolutely.
Because the first convention was in 1996. I had just been hired as the first executive director. I'd been on the board for several years in various roles, but I had just been hired as the first executive director, and an SWA from Cleveland State, the Final Four, the championships, were in Cleveland that year in December. And in about, July or August, this SWA from Cleveland calls me. She was also a PAVO member and a high school and small college volleyball official. And she said to me, fledgling, brand new executive director, hey, if the coaches have a convention, the championships, why don't the officials? And I went, sure. we'll do that. Talk about naive. And with the help of people like these two, Joan was my president at the time, Anne was on the board of directors, I pitched this idea of, hey, can we pull off a convention? And we didn't think about the fact that it was going to be totally different. We kind of treated those first few conventions as expanded clinics. And they were a lot of nuts and bolts more than we do now in terms of the nuts and bolts sides of things. And the whole idea was, well, if coaches benefit from it, surely we would benefit from it as well. And so we kind of slapped those first few together, seriously. And when I look at the product it is now, I mean, it's just amazing. It's grown into an event that officials, we try to market it as, here's a way you can reward yourself for a great season. Come here and you're going to get to share time with other people who do what you do, who understand what you do. You get to watch great officials at work, get to watch the best volleyball in the land, and they can sell it that way. But those first few were, I'm just going to say, a little rough. But you know what? We had to start somewhere, and we just kind of did. We didn't know any better. Let's put it that way.
They weren't that rough. They were good. It was the only gig in town. They were fabulous.
Yeah.
That's probably true.
I find it it's uplifting to be a part of when we all get there and people we haven't seen for how many years. I mean, it's just like a gathering that, we all know what everyone's been through. It's a sisterhood. It's a brotherhood. It's the ultimate gathering of minds. Volleyball lovers, wherever you are, like, just gather together. You get to talk to a newbie or the first time Final Four official. It's just, we're all together. It's natural camaraderie. I mean, Dana, you've been to it. What is your thought as maybe a non-volleyball official?
Man, it's one of my favorite events every year. And it's because of that. Everybody's so welcoming. It's total old home day. Like, you go and everybody's hugging, and it's just such an incredible atmosphere. And then when there's events where it's coaches and officials, just seeing the mutual respect between the two parties, which isn't always the case. I've been in situations where you can definitely tell there's like a line of demarcation between where the coaches and officials are sitting. And it's different. And it's one of those things where, yes, it's educational and you learn a lot, but you leave there and you feel really good about it. And you're kind of sad when it's over and you can't wait until the next one. And I just think it's such a good thing for the officiating community, for the officiating industry, just to have an event like that educates, that celebrates, that recognizes, it does all of those good things that we really should do more of as an officiating community. So, I mean, I give it 2 thumbs up every year. It's my favorite thing to do, and I get to be around good people, which makes it even better.
We're so glad you're there.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, you're gonna have to kick me out. I'm going until you tell me I can't anymore.
Good. That's good.
So, as part of that, one of the things that I think is super special about the convention is when the NCAA volleyball tournament semifinal officials have their matches broken down in front of everyone, God and everyone, at the awards banquet. So I've never heard of anybody in any sport doing that other than volleyball. I've talked to officials in other sports and they're like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. Can you tell us more about that event, like how it came to be, how the officials that are having their games broken down in front of everybody, how they feel about it? Just kind of some insight into that, because I think when you talk about uniqueness, that's unique. It's incredible and insightful. But ladies, what were your thoughts on that?
Well, it actually came from, I didn't mention that I coach, but I coached for 32 years at the high school level. And I would go religiously. I would take my stipend from coaching and I would fly myself to wherever the Final Four was, to the AVCA convention. And I would go to every session while a lot of my other friends were going to 2 sessions and drinking the rest of the day. Just saying. So I gleaned a lot, and I would go to this session with Doug Beal and Bill Neville, and they would take the teams involved from the semifinals, and each one would take one of the 2 teams that were going to be in the championship, and they dissected everything from film to stats to whatever, and they kind of came up with who should win because of these reasons. And I just thought that was fascinating. And being a loyal president to Marcia, I said, Marcia, we should try to do something like this, with the championship crew, instead of dissecting the game, dissect, our efforts here without influencing or without berating anyone. And so, Marcia, I'll let you take it from there. And Anne's been involved in that part of it too, as they take the stage and have to go in front of their peers, which they say is harder than doing the match itself.
Well, can I just add something before Joan's done talking? I think she's been on stage 7 times, Joan.
Oh, okay. Next.
7
Marcia.
times?
Both of these two have been on stage, so they can tell you more about it from that side.
I've been on stage once, and it's scary. I mean, it was more scary to do that than to go call a Final Four match. I mean, because these are my peers, these are my people, and they're going to tell me what I screwed up. And I remember, getting up there and no one's asking me questions. And I'm like, hey, all right, maybe I did okay. And then finally someone said, why are you using an orange whistle? I'm thinking, I like my orange whistle. It's like my lucky whistle. Why would you ask me that? And then I realized that was a beautiful time to say that, because it makes me look different than my partners. And we want to go in as a team, and here's Orange Whistle Anne coming out there with her orange whistle, and everyone else looks alike. So they were right. I immediately, at that point for the next match, said, I'm wearing my black whistle. I'll keep my orange whistle in my bag, but I won't use it for that match.
The session really is extremely unique. And when we first started it, I would be hard-pressed to tell you who the crew was the first time we did this, because it didn't start with the first convention. It took a few years, although, yes, I totally give Joan the credit for coming up with the idea, comparing it to what the coaches do. But I was the moderator for a lot of years. And because at that time I was secretary rules editor, and I was also executive director of PAVO, so it kind of made sense. And yet I was trying to stay very sensitive to the idea that these are people who not only maybe just called the biggest match of their life last night, but at least half of them have another match to do tomorrow or the next day. And we sure don't want to get in their heads, right? I mean, we don't want to screw with them right now and have them go out with any doubts or concerns or whatever. So you walk a very fine line there. But to give credit to our attendees, in however many years, 20 years or something of convention, we have very seldom had to nip a question or, okay, the orange whistle thing maybe got a little too far, but seriously, you would think out of the number of people we've had at 20 different conventions, somebody would have asked something that was a little too aggressive or a little out of line. And that's happened so few times. And when it did, the moderator just has to be very keen on nipping that one way or another without making anybody feel embarrassed. But that crew is taking a level of accountability that I don't know that any other official, I mean, yeah, they maybe up until the last few years haven't been on national TV as much as basketball, football, or some of the others, but to go in front of your peers and have that level of accountability, I think we ask a tremendous amount of them, and yet they all do it with aplomb. So credit to them.
And I think that's been so special. The first convention I went to, I remember just sitting there kind of in awe because, talk about just a feeling of vulnerability. Like you're on the stage and you're talking about your match the night before and you potentially are calling your national championship the next night. And just everybody does it with such grace and respect. And everybody in the audience just learns so much from it to also show that the people that are working at the semifinal and championship level, they make mistakes too, and it's okay. Like the learning and the whole thing is amazing, and I look forward to that every year because it is so special, and it is a volleyball thing. I know this year Sandra Serafini, who's soccer official, she was there for it, and she was blown away by it because it is something that's such a unique concept, special to volleyball, and just kudos to you all for having the vision to do that and kind of give everyone a treat that's at that banquet. I think it's exceptional. So something else unique there's a lot unique about the volleyball community, but something else that I've seen at our level, at the high school level, is that volleyball population continues to grow. So this past fall, we saw that there was another rise in the number of officials, and since the pandemic, it's up 14% as far as the volleyball officiating community in the high school realm. So do you have any ideas what the reasons are for that pattern of growth since the end of the pandemic, really?
So why don't you talk about the outdoor match, because that pretty much...
Ooh, good one.
Sure. I mean, I was going to address this in terms of the growth of volleyball in general, but we're constantly looking for new ways to gain visibility. Probably nothing took the biggest step up the ladder in the last few years more than the stadium match at Nebraska. When they first called me, the event manager at Nebraska, who's a pretty good buddy, he called me maybe 9-10 months before. And he said, you know what they're thinking about? They're thinking about doing a match in the football stadium. And I said, no way. I said, I know. I saw the press conference where Coach Cook said, yeah, if our AD had his way, we'd fill up the football stadium. And he said, yeah, well, the AD has taken it to heart and they may try to pull this off. And of course, I immediately started thinking about the challenges for the officiating crew. But I kept thinking to myself, they're not going to do this. They're not going to make this happen. And they end up with 92,000+ people in a football stadium cheering on a volleyball match. So things like that have created a level of visibility that none of us dreamed about. None of us, even those of us who've been around for decades in the volleyball world, we did not dream about that when we were at Northwestern, where 250 boyfriends, grandmas, and parents came to the match. And that was a good crowd that night. And now we've got that happening instead. And I just think the growth of that has created all of the domino effect of the growth of club is phenomenal. And out of that general population, there's going to be a few people that are wacky like us and go, you know what, I think I'd like to be like that person up on the stand and maybe follow those footsteps. So I think our visibility in general is growing by leaps and bounds, and credit to a lot of it to the collegiate world for working so hard at that.
And Anne, being the secretary rules editor, of course, had to get involved and say, well, sunglasses are legal.
Yeah, exactly. Sunglasses are legal.
Always thinking about the rules.
But they can't wear hats.
No, wear hats.
But
that segues right into the answer to your question, Dana. Are these two women who were at the helm at the time when rule changes were so instrumental in the growth of the game? So, I mean, we don't have time to go through all of them, but I watched both of these folks in front of a rules committee, coaches and administrators, who are the voting members of the committee, not these two, but they run the meeting smoothly, but both of them are just so intelligent about the game. Their volleyball IQ is at a high level and is able to speak in front of those coaches and, let's just be honest, lead them to what would be good for the game, not just officiating, but what's good for the game. So, for instance, Anne, under her tutelage, what did we get? We got instant replay, and I'll let her talk about that. But that was a huge deal when that came to volleyball. So, Annie, you can take it away from there.
Yeah, that was a huge deal because I knew not all of the members of the committee were for it. And thank God Joan and the current Secretary of Rules editor, Julie Volk, were there. And I just said to get the votes, you know what? I'm going to sit with this committee member, and I know she likes to drink beer. I'm going to buy her beers. And I said, Joan and Julie, you're going to come up with what it's going to look like, what a challenge is going to look like. And between us, like kind of schmoozing off, not in the committee, but talking to the different members.
Not schmoozing.
Lobbying. That's the word I was looking for. I mean, we got it done because there were a couple like, no, I'm a purist, we're not going to have that. But that really worked. And Joan and Julie came out with our techniques, and it was just a thing it was beautiful, when that happened.
But there's a lot of trust. I mean, the committees, as they have morphed, some folks get on committees because they want it on their resume. Maybe they don't have much of a volleyball background. They're multi-sport, and I'm not demeaning them at all. It's just sometimes it could be a crapshoot on a given year. And I think the best thing that volleyball did at the collegiate level was to have rule changes every other year. I think that's really good. Sometimes we think we're stifled a little bit because we'd like to see a certain rule pass. But it also then trickles down to the high school level. And I sit on the high school committee, and I see that. I watch, and Marcia, Julie have been guests at the high school meeting, and they're able to say, where the collegiate game is going. And the editors from National Federation in charge of those meetings do such a great job of, let's bring it back. What's good for high school? What's the best thing? When you talk about safety and, what is it called, Marcia? What of the game?
Integrity.
Integrity of the game and why you want to change rules. And so it's really, really nice to see the relationship between USA Volleyball, rules editor, or let's say rules interpreter, and then the secretary rules editor, to see them mesh without being pushy. And it hasn't always been that way. Years and years ago, there was kind of a snooty, well, USA Volleyball, this is the way we do it. Or in the collegiate game, come on, high school. And yet now the relationship, you and Lindsay coming to our championship, and of course, everybody going to everybody else's rules meeting just helps with the growth all along. And so I can't give kudos enough to the leaders of all three organizations' rule codes who have worked hard not to influence, but to just explain what's best for their particular game.
I love that. And I think that spirit of collaboration is another part of what is unique about volleyball, and to see the different levels interacting and really listening and looking out for the best interest of whatever level of play it is, and understanding, at our level, at the high school level, that there will be a trickle down at times. So I think just having those open lines of communication. So if we decide to pass a rule at the high school level, we have people we can ask, like, how has this affected your game? So that we have some awareness when we go into implementing changes at the high school level. So great answer.
And Anne, you have even said to the committee, hey, we took that from you all. You'll say to National Federation.
Exactly. There are a couple times where they wrote rules language, and I was looking at the ones I wrote, and I went, that's terrible, Anne, and what they have is perfect. I mean, I love going to that meeting. I mean, I learned a lot, and it made me think about, the genesis of how we get to the NCAA level. But that was just such a fun meeting. I missed it. I really did.
I love that. And I think officiating, we steal from each other all the time. Like, we're all about that, because if something's working, why reinvent the wheel? Like, you might have to tweak it for your level or the skill level of the players, but if something's good and sound, let's use it and try to, make it fit us. So I think that there's a lot that can be learned from each other, and sometimes other sports and other levels might lose sight of that a little bit.
And Dana comes to the meeting as National Federation.
I do.
And she is able to give us, and after the meeting, I sent her an email and I just said, you are so refreshing. And I mean that sincerely, Dana. We're getting kudos. It's a love fest.
Always.
But I'm sincere when I say the strides that you have made at the high school level, and the shoulders that you rub just to make sure that you educate and allow people to be the best they can through now video and through this podcast and all the innovation types of things that you've done. Dana, kudos to you.
Oh, thank you. And
yeah.
I'm always well aware that the only reason I'm able to do that is because of people like you three. So you all make me better, and you make me want to do better for officials. My whole career has been service of officials and with officials, and I lean on people like you heavily to be able to make sure that they're getting what they need, because I still feel like officials are an underserved population, and it's my job to make sure that I have resources and people to help support them at the end of the day. So thank you, Joan. But you all make my job easier. So thank you. So we're kind of toward the end, and we have a final question. So
that's good, because I didn't pay my electric bill, and it's getting hard. So go ahead.
We're timing it really well. I didn't even know about your electric bill, but man, I'm glad to help. So the From A to Zebra podcast has a mission every week to educate, elevate, and excite our listeners. What can each of you tell us about officiating that accomplishes that mission?
I think one thing is we have to get the message out there about the rewards. And by rewards, in the first place, I mean, it's okay for you to say, I like the money I get. That's okay to say. And I think we skip over that sometimes, like we're all duty bound to be of service to our sport. And I think it's okay to say that the money is a motivator. That's okay. The other thing I think that I think could be included, and you do a great job of doing this every time I've heard you refer to officiating, you include this, is the social skills that you develop and the personal skills that you develop through officiating. And those go with you through the other aspects of your life. Your personal relationships, your work relationships, all will get better because of the skills you're going to learn as an official. And I think getting that message out there that, it benefits you monetarily, it benefits you socially, and it benefits you in terms of your personal skills is the best message we can get out there overall about whatever sport or level you choose to officiate.
Love it. Anne, now I'm calling on people. Getting bold.
I'm going to say ditto to what Marcia said. I mean, exactly what she said. You learn how to control tempo. Your decision making gets clearer. And it's worth it. It's hard. If you're going to struggle when you first begin, you're going to struggle. But most people that would assign you or use you are going to put you with, okay, here's one of my newbies. I got to put him with a really strong veteran that can get him through this. I mean, there's always a place for you. And speaking of that, hey, pavo.org. If you're interested in becoming an official in NFHS, either one, we're always looking for people. You can tell we enjoy it and it's fun. So just put that in the back of your mind. Have that there when you're saying, what can I do today? Well, you could become an official today. You could learn how to officiate,
Absolutely.
I have nothing to add, Dana.
Wow.
It's yeah, I know. That's kind of different from me, but they said it all.
It's awesome. Well, Marcia Alterman, Anne Pufahl, Joan Powell, thank you so much for taking time. I know how busy the three of you are, and on behalf of anybody who has anything to do with officiating, especially volleyball, thank you for what you do. You make all of us better, all three of you, and I adore all of you, and I look forward to December every year so that we can hang out, and I always learn something from you all, but most importantly, I always laugh. So I appreciate you always giving me a very happy heart whenever I leave wherever PAVO is every year. But thank you for everything that you do. And thank you for your time on the From A to Zebra podcast. We appreciate it. And I'm sure that our listeners will as well.
Thanks for joining us. And put your hands up. Monster block.
Monster block. I know I was supposed to have the music. I fell down a little bit, but we did that at the end, so Anne didn't just hang up on us. But we do want to say thank you.
I thought Dina was having a medical issue when she kept doing it over and over.
I was.
I
might have. I think I sustained a head injury at some point. I don't know. It's okay. We're working through that.
We appreciate the cheerleader in you, trust me.
That there's a little bit there. But from A to Zebra podcast, we want to say thank you for tuning in. And don't forget to check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and X for more information about the show. Until next time, thanks for joining.
Thanks, friends.
Be sure to hit that like button, follow, subscribe, and also catch From A to Zebra on Instagram at from_A_2_zebra, Facebook, From A to Zebra podcast, and on X at From A to Zebra.